free, open source, and is in use all over the country. It's a huge amount of servers and a large number of researchers use it. It's very active in the scientific community. So if you want to learn more about that, have it installed on your computer. When I say installed, there's two ways we can do it. One way is through virtual machines, which is essentially it's a program that runs on top of Windows so that you can try out different operating systems. It's literally just like a program. The other way is to dual boot. So we would help you set up your computer so that you could either boot Windows or Linux.
There's the third way, which is we could fix your Windows.
Right. Or if you want us to help you delete Windows and just install Linux, I will gladly help with that. No worries. So, okay. Just as a heads up, there is still a whole bunch of pizza left, so if you want more, feel free to get it. Our speaker this week is Terry Gold. Terry specializes in RFID and security integration. So let's welcome him. Give him a big hand.
Hello. So I'll get into a little bit of what I've been doing for the past 15 years. Again, my name is Terry Gold. I've been working for large-scale vendors for the past 15 years, focusing on Fortune 500, Global 1000, identity and security. I could talk about it forever, but my purpose isn't really to hear myself talk. So I know the subject pretty well. I'd rather just understand a little bit more, keep it an open forum. What it would take to have you guys get the most out of it, right? So this can be a little fluid. Like I know the topic, maybe it would help me understand if we just kind of have a show of hands. How many people here are majoring in IT and engineering? And just a quick shout out, what are the other areas that you're doing, or is it just math? Math, okay, all right. So raise a hand, how is everybody's IT technical skills in the room? All right, you're a DEF CON guy, okay, everybody's kind of a little bit here, a little bit there, all right. For the IT-focused people in the room, how many people have the intention to go build and engineer things versus going and work for a Fortune company in IT? Let's see, I'm going to go build things. All right, let's see, I'm going to go work for IT. All right, we have a few. Okay, great. So I think I know how to cut this down a little bit. Let's start off, and I have to hop through some of this a little quick, and I want to make time for a demo that I have. So let's agree what we want to get out of the presentation, okay? So I propose the following, and I want to hear just people shout out and say yay, nay, that's useful, suggest things. I think it might be useful in the room to understand, out there in the Fortune 1000 market, around identity and security, what are some of the big things that are really haunting them, that aren't going away in the next 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years?
The way they implemented their security, mostly with those cards, they have them very basic and can easily be compromised. I'm going to show a demo on that. I'm going to compromise it. But even broader than that, inside of the world of IT, forget about the cards. When you think about a big company, Pfizer, all right? And this is just a generic example, and if you're recording this, this is nothing specific about Pfizer, looking at the camera. I have probably, I don't know, let's say I have 50,000 employees. The way I manage how people access intellectual property, whether it's clinical trials, research and development, anything, it's all digital nowadays, how we collaborate. And you guys might not remember, but when I started out 15 years ago, nothing was really very digital. Now everything's digital, but in order to provide and manage the privileges around those people and what they access and who accesses what, I have to have a really good handle around identity. Around what makes up an identity, how do I issue it, how do I manage it, how do I attach privileges to it, how do you go ahead and access these research files over here but not these over here, how do I form dynamic groups? The whole common denominator is identity. Without identity, you don't have a fabric that goes across the organization to go ahead and apply policy. Policy's huge. because there's so much regulation. There's a lot of breaches going on. There's a lot of impact. So it's not just about, you might see a lot of these cards and everything, and I'm going to go talk about cards, but it's really about identity, the impact of security to protect my digital assets in my enterprise, because I have to manage risk. That's all it is, right? Okay, so in this presentation, I'll also propose that we'll talk about what are some of the ways that we commonly do that in the Fortune 500 organizations. But in that, we'll also talk about not just the ways we can do it, but ways we can apply it. So the way I go ahead and apply that inside a Fortune 1000 company also indicates how vendors need to go ahead and build products to go ahead and achieve that. So we'll tackle that. And we'll talk about some of the hot points around what's really going on, where it's going, and we'll bleed down into, I'm going to lead into that, we'll bleed down into what are the different areas you can apply identity and security through an enterprise. So we talked about IT, digital assets, but there's also something else called corporate security inside of organizations. You know, guards, guns, doors, physical access to my physical assets, right? So we talked about research documentation, and electronic trial information in the case of Pfizer, or design plans, marketing, go-to-market plans. But in order for somebody to go ahead and perform the research, you'd probably get into a research lab. I probably need to protect that, right? My front door has electronic access. I use a card to get in. So pervasive throughout an organization, you have to provide both digital identity management and security, and also physical access, identity and security. Those worlds are colliding. And for the past 7 years, I've been specializing in that area where they've been colliding. So I've done large-scale deployments. When I say deployments, I'm the subject matter expert that goes in and tells them, looks at their systems, and tells them really how they need to get there, what they need to do. And typically, it's it's a 3-4 year plan to get there. So companies like, and cut this out of the. PKI, digital element, signing, encryption, all that stuff. Large telcos, banks. I've worked with Warner, I've worked with Sony Pictures, done their strategy. So a lot of global companies that I've tackled in this area. Recently, I left the corporate world to start my own identity and security analyst practice, because one of the problems in this industry is, on the IT side, you have a lot of vendor neutrality. You have companies like Gartner. Has anybody heard of Gartner? Right? Yeah, it's kind of like if you're going to go research a car, you go to Consumer Reports. They're independent. They've done the research. You kind of get the data dump, and before you start really looking at Samsung, maybe. The IT side has a lot of that. It's been a practice like that for years. On the corporate security side, it's been a lot different. It's a $30 billion industry. And it has been done just by, hey, we were policed together 15, 20 years ago, so we go out for a steak dinner, we do a handshake, and I'll go with you. But when they do that, it has implications for the next 15 years from a technical perspective, and they're not really looking at it. So you have a lot of challenges when I have an organization that has, let's say, 500 buildings worldwide, right, with 15,000 access points. And I have to control all of them, and I made a decision over a steak dinner. That doesn't really help me around long-term integration and strategy. In fact, it locks me in. And a lot of these vendors have built their solutions on lock-in, which, I'll start getting into this, is kind of the problem that we have and why things are quite insecure. Now, I gave a presentation that was very technically focused at B-Sides Los Angeles, and Justin asked me to come here and do something similar. I'm going to mix it up a little bit, and let's talk about, actually, before, okay, we're going to go do a demo of this. So RFID, radio frequency identification, okay? Everything will be focused on the enterprise, but you can apply it in different areas. RFID is basically a contactless mechanism to transmit data, okay? It's used in several different applications, so it's used in anything from dog tagging to to try and identify products when I'm scanning stuff out in the checkout line. But it's been used in ID cards for quite a long time as well. So does anybody here have an electronic ID card? No? How many people have walked into a pretty big company and they don't have a lock that they go into a door and turn it, they just use a card. And they go beep, click, okay, right? So it's a common application. It's been around for about 20 years, okay? It is really, it's not very secure. I don't want to lump everything in that category because it can't be, but the way it's been implemented for the past 20 years, it's been very, very careless. And that's on that corporate security side. Now, the risk is, if I go ahead and gain access to your front door, and I get through your front door, think about the world we live in right now with social engineering, right? I mean, I know a lot of people that all they do is get paid to go hack into companies, or paid by the company to come back in a week and tell them how they got in, how they access certain things. And they have a little get out of jail free card, right? That if they get caught, it's probably the only one that knows about is the chief legal counsel, the CEO, or the CFO that hired them. So, police get called the whole thing, and they're like, I have to get out of it. But they generally don't get caught. So we're talking about penetrating networks, installing malware, using a lot of tricks in the trade and trying to get to the company jewels, digital assets. How many would believe that out of all the pen testers that I know, about 80% of them have said, I haven't literally had to hack any code for the past 9 months. It's all social engineering. And the typical social engineering is, well, I'm going to go ahead and just walk around the premises and dumpster dive. I'm going to go ahead and just get my hands on anything that came out of that building that can give me a clue on how to get to that next step and get further down into gaining access to something, so I can make the leap and gain greater access to something else. Right? It's a principle, right? One step at a time. The problem is if my front door is really, really insecure, and I can subvert that door that's supposed to only let employees in, or another door like a research center or a data center, I can just walk right in and grab the crown jewels. Right? I mean, but the problem is that IT hasn't really looked at this because it hasn't been their domain. This corporate security group, the people that deal with pandemic, deal with an executive is at risk in Brazil, we need to fly down there, the doors, the guards, the guns. Though that's been a separate department from IT for years and years, they haven't really talked. IT has just assumed that they have a door in the data center, and those people know how to secure doors. It's secure because you need a card. What they don't know is that card is easy to manipulate. Okay, so that's that's kind of the context. Now, if you look at the world of ID, you had a paper ID back in, say, 1920s or 30s, just paper. No photo or anything. You got to stop by the police, you just show them a piece of paper. Okay, great, right? So a couple decades later, they started adding photos. And when I was, a young kid, I mean, I could copy the photo ID for purposes of, whatever the purpose was, right? So, hey, I was 16 and I could do it. Well, the government knows that, and they're relying on identification not just for public services, but other things now. So they've made an effort to go ahead and strengthen that even further. When you look at today's identification, the wave that is partially here and coming, it's actually a lot smarter. Not only is there a photo, not only are there watermarks on there where you need special light UV light markers, but they have chips on there. So they have semiconductors, okay, little microchips. And there are different types of microchips. Some are really dumb, some are pretty smart. Some can perform cryptographic functions to scramble data, protect data. And if you look at the US passport program, that actually has a fairly intelligent chip. Okay, so replicating a US passport is probably not really going to happen. You have to hack a lot of things, and you're probably not going to get that done for reasons we're not going to get into today. But corporate IDs are starting to embed these semiconductors, these chips in there. When you do RFID, you have a chip, but I want to point out there are different types of chips. Right? So if you go ahead and you pull out a government ID, right? If I was issued an ID by the Department of Defense, they have sourced my digital identity from different sources. They validated that through whatever it might be, Experian, you know, a background check, biometric fingerprints, whatever they need to validate that I am who I say I am when I go to enroll. Then they go ahead and assign me a card with a secure element microchip in there that can go ahead and store that electronic data. So later on when I present it, that electronic data that's in there is an electronic credential that can be used in their authentication system. It was issued by them, it's managed by them, they know that, they bound me to it, okay? So there's a chain of trust, okay? And there's that paradigm where it's really, really secure, and if you look at something like Visa and Cisco, it's very secure, similar to that model. But I guess what I'm trying to point out is there are different types. So like when I went to this hotel in Las Vegas to give a presentation at East Side of Las Vegas, okay? And first thing when I got to my room was like, oh, let's have a little fun, see what's on there, right? This is not that, right? They're both cards, so it's easy to confuse. This one has a small chip inside it, totally different animal, okay? We'll get into what that is. These right here are purpose-built with a lot of things built in it for, just for the purpose really of preventing brute force attacks in many different ways. And this program's been going on with the government since about 2001 through the Army, Navy, Pentagon, White House. In fact, if you go ahead and ask anybody who's employed by the federal government, all several million of them, whoever it is, whether they're in the White House, whether it's Obama, whether it's Pentagon or Department of Energy, if they work for the Fed, ask for their ID, you'll see a secure element chip on it, period. It's mandated, okay? A lot of enterprises are taking that, okay? So we have identity down. This is real quick, and this is basically, if you were to go out and Google a lot of stuff around RFID hacking, physical access control card hacking, you would come up with a lot of stuff around Black Hat, DEF CON, and presentations and web demos, and people saying, hey, you know, yeah, I hacked it. And it's good, but see, here's the deal. The deal is a lot of people doing this, they're full-time IT hackers, very smart, smarter than I am, that's for sure, right? But they all kind of do the same thing. They assume that if you can go ahead and clone the information on the chip on the card and port it to another card that I provided, then I hacked it. And I've never seen anybody really do anything different than clone one card for another, so I have two of them. The problem with that is it's respectable that within about, I don't know, within about spending a week preparing for that presentation, they're able to figure out how to clone it. But it gives everybody in the audience the assumption that all they're doing is cloning a binary string on the chip. Binary string, ones and zeros, that's it, for the people that don't know. So it's just, you know, it's just, you know, maybe 26 bits, 26 ones and zeros, okay? That's really not what's going on. And the problem with that is, if I just take that methodology and I use that in all my assumptions and apply that to the enterprise, I'm really going to get nowhere. I'm really going to only get so far in certain instances the minority of the time. I'm not really going to be able to go in there and perform a proper pen test and really figure out how to get through you know, this door, the data center, and do all these things. But I'm not going to be able to properly advise the customer that I'm hired to go contract and go ahead and tell them really where they're at and what to do. So there's a lot more to it, and what the people that do these presentations typically don't have, they don't have context, right? They haven't spent the past 10 years inside of Fortune 1000 companies and see how the binary string is applied through the different cards and the different readers and the different enterprises and control systems, the process by which they get issued, to know that there's a lot more to it, to really go in and say, look, I'm going to make you a blanket statement and tell you that anything that is, who's heard of proximity, RFID? Okay. Anything's proximity, hacked, gone, right? But if you were to go ahead and go through the traditional, hey, I cloned it route, that probably most of the time won't be the case, okay? So we'll get into that. And by the way, the reason why I look at the camera and tell them to rip some of this stuff out once in a while, the vendors that make this technology, even though I'm going to show you what it looks like, so there's really nothing highly secret about it, because I can show you right on the card what's in there through terminal interface and what's going on. They tend to be very uncomfortable if their customer base learns how vulnerable they are and how unspecial it really is. And don't cut those deals over a steak dinner. So their effort is to suppress people that talk openly about this. The way they do that is that they have a team of lawyers. I don't have a team of lawyers. They sick their team of lawyers that are paid for by the corporate bucket of people, and basically to the point where you don't feel like paying your own lawyer tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and say, I give up, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Okay? So where I dance around and I say, cut this, or that's where I'm going with it, because I try to be fair to the vendors, but I have to be fair to myself as well. Okay? So let's talk about a little bit about a physical access control system, how this works. Okay? So when you walk into a building, you got this reader on the door right here, okay? And I got a card, and I'm going to take this card. It's going to let me through the door. What happens though is, for the IT people in here, you're probably thinking that when you put your card to this reader is sending a call back to a server, right? Like I would at a computer, and I'd enter my password, and then it would go hit a directory or server and come back and say kind of yes or no. In the building access control world, that's not happening. It's really, really different. And what's really going on is, see that reader right there? You have that reader on the door right there. This thing's, what happens is it's actually that, you see that little gadget up there with the ones and zeros below, it's like the green and black? That's installed in a wall, okay? And that is actually making the decision. Why is it doing that? Because if I lose power, this thing could go offline. I don't really have any way of distributing credentials to compare it to. These don't have a database. In fact, the wiring that goes through the building, it's not a Cat5. It's not a network cable. This is an these are old buildings. They're running something called Weekend, which basically only knows how to split the ones through one wire, the zeros through another wire, and basically it comes back to go ahead and combine them, and it's actually pretty simple. And what happens is when I go ahead and the top left corner, that's the person who sits at the desk, and I come in and they go ahead and say, hey, look, I need to enroll a person, I need to get a card on the first day, whatever it is. They give that person a card, and then they go ahead and enter the number. There's the number. So everything that works with their RFID around building access control is associated a number. Basically, think of it like a serial number with you, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. You're 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. And whenever you present this card, the system associates 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 with you. So when I issue this card in the access control system, I make 1, 2, 3, 7 active in the system. And when I present this card over to that reader passes the binary data in the chip on the card. That controller makes the decision as to, do we have a match? Okay, that's basically kind of how it goes. Any questions on that? All right. Talk a little bit about, there are two technologies really in building access control. When we say RFID and building access control, really, there are two frequencies. So frequencies, you got wavelengths, okay? 125 kilohertz, that's known as prox. Anything proximity is 125 kilohertz. Long, slow, and this is more of a conceptual explanation for the people who aren't very, very technical in the room. So let's just say on every peak in the frequency, you had a number, which is part of that serial number. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 8, 1, right? So long and slow, okay? There's another frequency, 1356 megahertz, okay? It moves a lot quicker. Obviously, it's going to pack a lot more in it. Why would I want it to be faster? What does that get me?
More data.
Why do I want more data? These are the IT guys. Yeah, because when I put 1234281, it's in the clear. That reader on the door, it's always on. This card, whenever it comes in proximity or close to that reader essentially from its field powers this card up because it has no battery, and then it goes ahead and has this just releases its data in all directions. It's indiscriminate. So if I go ahead and get close to one of these cards with any type of device on the same frequency, I can capture that serial number. Not very cool, right? This is basically my password. So that's when people talk about cloning. I bump into people and I skim them because I can go ahead and grab that. Then I program another card and I'm you, right? With 13.5.6, you have the ability to go ahead and put encryption on there. Encryption basically has the ability to scramble that. So even if you go ahead and get something from the field, you don't really know what you got. The reason why it's faster and can pack more data as a benefit is because the 125 kilohertz proximity, when you use it in a corporate enterprise, it seems really fast. It isn't really that fast. The deal is it's got so little data. We're talking about 26 bits, which is equal to about, I don't know, 2 or 3 characters, right? So it's really, really small. So it seems fast. If you had to go ahead and take this, which could be up, it could be a lot more characters, like, quite a bit, it'll seem just as fast when I add the whole encryption string, okay? So you have different technologies on there. I'll get into this really kind of quick where what happened, well, okay, so when I have a string on the card, I'm trying to condense all this down. When I have a string on this card, a bit string, 1s and 0s, okay? I might have a lot more data on here than the actual serial number. So the serial number is not programmed on here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What happens is the reader and the system know when it's read which ones really count. That's kind of the high-level explanation on all this for the non-technical people. Okay, so each vendor has their own riddle, and that's why it's not just vendors programming just a serial number on there. So if I clone the serial number, I got everything. Back to the beginning of the presentation where I said, it's not just about, hey, I cloned it, so I hacked it. You kind of have to know what counts, right? That's kind of the deal, or else you're not going to get it right. There's several reasons why vendors have done this little riddle. It's not for security. It's more to make their systems special, so the customers have to go back to them to purchase the widget, unfortunately. It's created a lot of problems around compatibility, and I had 500 buildings. So let's talk a little bit about, I'll do a demo. I'll show you what's on these cards, okay? That's just the simplest way to do it. So, I don't know if I have to authorize again, but let's go ahead and do this. So this is a terminal interface, and this will just go, I have a device back here that you can't see, all right, that knows how to read the card itself, and I put it on there. I have to start this back up. I have to start back up, unfortunately. Sometimes it doesn't like to sit there. It's a Windows thing. I try to set it up at the beginning of the demo, and then it just doesn't like it. Yeah, generally I don't have a problem with it, but if it sits there for a while, it doesn't. That's a thing I know with usually how it works, right? So I just read this card, okay, and the contents of that semiconductor microchip tells me the vendor who encoded that bit string on there. It also tells me that the facility code is 14. It tells me that the bits are 26 bits. It could be 32, 34, 40, there's a whole bunch of different ones. It also tells me the card serial number, 8688, okay? So I could actually go ahead and say, all right, let's go ahead and say, I could go ahead and, so an easy way to clone it would be, I got another card here that's blank, and I could go right, verify. So when I go decode again, this card's an identical one, okay? Not very good, right? So I could also go ahead and manipulate it to say, I want to make this card something completely different. So I can entirely manipulate and say, I don't want it to be 8688, I want it to be 7532. Okay, now here's the cool thing. Facility code, usually companies have the same facility code throughout their whole organization. It could be almost any number. Okay, I think it's 1 through 240. Okay, the deal with that is when you're going ahead and cloning stuff, you don't really know what that is. You're just cloning, and so you have a 1 in 240 shot of really getting that right or not. And if you don't have that right, even though you have a serial number, you're not going to get in. Okay. Now that I got all this data, here's the social engineering deal. I can go ahead and say, okay, I want to go hack into ABC Fortune 100 company, and I just went ahead and bumped and scanned or got somebody's card in their ashtray from the parking lot. And however I got it, they're not too hard to get because people don't treat these like a secret, and they emit in a field, so I'll get it. I got your facility code 14, okay? Now, once I get that facility code, I don't need to clone anymore. All I need to do is say, if I have a starting point that's 8688, and I could go all the way up through, on 26 bits, 65,000, whatever it is. I'm going to go ahead and say, buy 200 of these cards on the internet, online, from almost anywhere. They're blank. I have a reference point of a valid number. Typically, they issue these in sequence, right? So I issued you 8,688. I probably issued somebody 8,689. I shouldn't have, but they haven't really been too discriminate about how they do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and buy these for $1 or $2 a piece online. And then I'm going to go ahead and mint. I'm going to create 100 up, starting from 8688, whatever it is. And then I'm going to go ahead and mint 100 down in sequence. How many do you think would be valid in that range of 200?
Probably quite a few.
Well, people have left. They might have been deactivated, right? Depends how old 8688 is, right? But the reality is, I can probably bet you about a third of them are valid. So, you know, hey, I got 500 buildings, I got 30 data centers, I got a whole bunch of things. I'm going to go somewhere with that whole stack. I'm already sniffing around dumpsters anyway for stuff they threw out or whatever it is. So when I go up to the building, I'm just going to take this stack and just go boom, boom, boom until lights go green. Oh, this one's green, great, green. This goes in this pocket. Red, this goes in this pocket. And I just sort them out, which one's valid, which ones aren't. Then I go ahead and take the ones that are green. I got through the front door, right? That's my intel, that's my little intel. Then I get in the front door. Now I got in the front door, but corporations don't really, you get in the front door, but there are a lot of access points in there a lot of times, where there should be. If I want to get to the executive offices and break into the CEO's office, chances are there's a couple more doors to get through, right? If I want to get into the data center, getting into the front door, you know, because a lot more people have access to the front door than they do the data center. You know, if I'm in a Fortune 500 company and I have 30 data centers, there's probably only about 100 people who really have access to all those data centers, right? So what do? Well, I go through that all over again. I take my stack of good cards and I'm going to see who I am today, because each one of those cards represents a different set of privileges against that identity, right? So to wrap this section up, and I know I don't have too much time, and I want to leave some room for questions. I have a friend out in New York that he does pen testing and hacking for a living, and he got a major contract by one of the largest companies in the country to go ahead and try to go and breach their facilities. That was the goal. If he can get inside the facility, grab something that he could only get by being in the facility, and then go back to the CFO, he basically did his job, okay? The wrinkle was, most organizations are relatively easy to subvert because their policies aren't that tight, or as much as they should be. Like if I go to Silicon Valley and I just go ahead and print out their logo on a hoodie, chances are somebody's just going to hold the door open for me. I don't need to do this, right? I just look like one of them, right? It's the hoodie effect. This organization has guarded, gated, they're a government contractor, people stay overnight. I mean, it's a weird thing. He ended up having to ship a person in a large FedEx container. And that wasn't easy, getting them to sign for it, the whole thing. The person got out of the box and shipping and receiving, got out, looked around, took something, walked out of the building, okay, done. It took him 3 months of planning to actually do that because, emulating the different schedules of the carrier and everything like that. So when he met me and saw how much I knew, because he had talked to his friends about cloning, but he didn't have anything to really clone, he was like, man, if I had your knowledge, I probably wouldn't have had to go through that for 3 months. I could have just walked through the front door, and just went to a bunch of different access points and walked out. I'm like, yeah. You could have just sat there smoking a cigarette and skimmed and walked back, cloned and minted, and that's it. You probably could have got to the CEO's office. So that's the deal. There's a few more things, but I want to leave it open for Q&A. And before I do, what I probably would say is, where's all this going, right? Where this is going from an IT perspective is we use usernames and passwords by default because they're cheap. They come with the application. More and more it was watch out for people that are not present in my four walls. So I'm worried about people in Russia, in the 80s and the 90s hacking into my network. So they gave you one-time password tokens. Anybody know what those are? Anybody heard of RSA security? They're little devices that they change numbers, and then you enter that number as your password, basically, and it changes each time. And IT's struggling with that now because with all the breaches, the RSA devices that change your numbers, they're still a password. And passwords, what they don't do is if somebody gets in somehow or some way, they don't protect the data. They don't encrypt the data. They don't scramble the data. I can't sign any electronic document so somebody really knows that it's from me. Okay? The only thing that really does that is encryption. Okay? And you need certificates to do that. So that's why the government had moved to one of these, hardcore cards that can go ahead and do PKI certificates, encryption, all in this little self-contained device. Now, you take RFID, we talked about how it's applied to the corporate enterprise and how easy it can be hacked for building access, but RFID can be used for transit. You can put RFID in your smartphone. How many people have heard of NFC? That's a type of RFID, okay, that rides on 13.5.6, what we talked about, okay? The deal, though, is with 13.5.6, there are a lot of implementations. NFC is one of them, and NFC does have different security levels. It's not perfect, but it's way different than the building access side. And so where this is all going is you have a variety of uses for different environments that you can make it at a varying level of security to perform all these functions. And so I could have this secure chip in my phone. That's what's going on with trying to figure out all this NFC stuff with, are they going to include an iPhone or it's in Samsung Galaxy. It has a secure element. These secure elements are basically the same things as a SIM. And once it's on there, I can go use it for transit. I can go use it to get into the building. This can be applied to many different applications as well. So where it's really going is having a generic chip on a form factor or device that you want, whether it's a mobile phone, a watch, a card, whatever it is, and then the issuing party basically telling you the digital piece that's assigning a digital piece that's in there, so you can go ahead and use it against their environment. And I would say this is already happening where cards are really going to start going away. How many people here are going to be attending Cal Poly for the next 2 or 3 years? Okay, I'm going to make a bet. You can email me and harass me if you want. That in about by the time that you are ready to graduate, there will already be a discussion or some plans that you'll be able to use your mobile device for your purchases, unlock your dorm rooms, whatever it might be. Okay. For you, it's really convenient because we don't lose our mobile phones. For the university, it's an upside because they don't have to have somebody sitting there printing these out, issuing them. They just go over the air, whatever it is, they send out a call, they know how to get to your device, and it gets that little digital credential on there, off of there, or pull it off. So for them, it's a huge win as well. Right? So anyway, I want to take some questions before we really shut this down. Yep, we could.
So everybody, thanks for coming. We're kind of out of time, so we're going to move outside now. So don't forget, this Friday's Install Fest next Tuesday is Classified Network Administration. So make sure you come out for that. It's interesting. Thanks, everybody.